since people are telling their experiences where they've experienced a change in the way they understand other people and themselves, I wanted to have an opportunity to share what I refer to as my aha moment. Now, I need to give you just a little bit of background so that you can understand why this was so significant for me. At one point in my career, I did some substitute teaching in some special education classrooms. And I found myself spending about a 2-week period in a classroom that was a young adult multi-handicap classroom. What that meant was there were about a half a dozen students between the ages of 16 and 21. All of them were diagnosed with either severe or profound mental retardation, and all of them were diagnosed with some degree of autism. Now, in that classroom, there was a young lady, just so that we have a name to tag with her, let's say her name was Jane. Jane was a really interesting young lady. From all that I had learned about autism to that point, Jane presented with all of the classic symptoms. And what I mean by that is she was very specific about the amount of personal space that she required and got very uncomfortable if people didn't respect that distance. She wore white cotton gloves on both hands at all times. She would color extremely neatly, but monochromatically, all one color. She did not communicate verbally. She made a few utterances, but not what you would recognize as words. And I remember her pre-vocational activity was she was given a sheet of paper and an ink pad and a stamper, and she was supposed to try to stamp within 8 rectangles drawn on the sheet of paper. Now, at the time, Jane was about 16 years old. Probably about 10 years later, I was at a training that was being hosted by the State Office of Mental Retardation. And it was a clinical supervision institute where we would spend 2 very intensive days on one specific topic. And we had been studying the topic of autism during this particular session with a wonderful woman by the name of Mary Lapos. The second morning, Mary said she was going to be bringing guest speakers. So that morning, as we were waiting in the classroom, there were about 40 of us professionals there, Mary came walking into the classroom with 2 people, and one of them was Jane. Now, this is about 10 years later, not a hair had changed on her head. The other lady that came in with her was Jane's mother. I had never met Jane's mother before that. And so I walked over to Jane and I said, "Hi," and Jane continued walking straight on by me. And I remember going to my seat thinking, well, now wasn't that foolish of you to think that she was going to remember you? After all, it's been almost 10 years. You were only in the classroom for 2 weeks. And besides, she does have profound mental retardation and autism. And I sat down in my seat with the presumptions that I made. Now, Jane and Mary went up to the front of the room, and Mary opened up a laptop computer and got out an extra long Marks-a-Lot marker. And Mary held on to the back of the marker, and Jane grabbed the front with her finger extended. And she started tapping on the keyboard. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, yeah, right, I know this person. Remember, I was the teacher that would give her that pre-vocational activity with the stamper and the pad every day. Well, after about a minute or two of Jane tapping on the keyboard, Mary started to read off of the screen. And the screen said, "Hi, Deb, I remember where I know you from now." And it was the name of the high school where Jane and I had met. And I was just totally stunned. I about fell out of my chair. And so when I gathered myself to be able to speak back, I said, Hi Jane, I'm surprised you remember me." And she typed again, and she typed in, "I remember you as being a kind lady." And all I could think in that moment was, boy, am I glad I was kind on those days. Because, when you substitute teach, not every day is a kind day. And not every kid that met me would remember me as a kind lady. And Jane, at that point, was just finishing her first class at one of the state universities in sociology, which she aced. She later went on to be a fully matriculated student at that university, and then transferred to a major university outside of the state of Pennsylvania. She is an absolutely brilliant, brilliant woman. And just so that I really drive home the point of her brilliance, please remember that in the classroom that we were in together 10 years prior to that experience, there was no alphabet around the top of that classroom, because those kids can't learn those things. Nobody taught Jane how to read. Jane carried a better cume in college than I did, and I had the benefit of a family and an education system that believed from the very beginning of my entrance in that system that I had the potential for college. So the presumption of intellect, I can tell you I will never be able to look at another person in the same way that I did prior to that experience.